Hello viewers, you are welcome to the Quantity Surveying Academy. In today's video, we are going to be discussing about how to take off quantities for windows, and I'll be taking note of Louvre's window as my case study. In my previous video, I've actually explained how we can deal with similar situations when it comes to doors in our building, and the procedure for measuring window is also not quite different from that of doors. Like I explained initially, there are different ways in which we can measure for windows. Of course, I mentioned that we can slate out a PC sum, a prime cost sum for windows, which will state out the total amount of money that is required to purchase and supply this window to the site. And on the other hand, if you are a student, you would need to know each component that this window encompasses, so that you'll be able to know what are required to make up a single window. So for the sake of examination purposes and other let me say assessments that is related to quantity surveying practice, I'm going to be making sure that this video is a bit brief and clear enough so that you can have a perfect understanding of what a window is all about. Now this is a louvers window. This is a sample of a Louvre window, and if I want to measure this louvers window, like I stated in our doors, the takeoff item includes measuring for the window frames. Now the window frames include the head. We can see this is the head. Forget about this. This is our lintel. This is the concrete lintel, so this is not included. So we have the head. We are going to measure for the head. We'll measure for the seal. The seal is this particular part at the base of the window itself. So you can see the window is not like the door. Door only has a head as part of its frame, but the window has a head. This is the head. And the window has a seal at the base, so they're actually the same dimension. Then after measuring for the head and seal, we'll also measure for the mullion and the jamb. Now the mullion is this particular framework at the middle. So we have two mullion, and you can see they are 15 mm each. So we have one mullion, another mullion. So we'll measure for the mullion. We'll now measure for the jamb. Take note of it. This is our jamb. This is the jamb, and this one here at the middle is the mullion. I hope you can see it clearly. So this is the mullion, we have the jamb, then we have the head and the seal. So these are the framework we need to measure for. And unlike the doors, in doors we usually measure for the ironmongeries, but in this case, all we need to do is to put down, since this is a louvers window, it's going to have what we call the louvers carrier, which will carry the glass work here. And if you've seen your louvers window before, it has something like this and another one here. It is in these two things that we now insert our glass work. So these two stuff we have here are called the louver carriers, but they are interconnected. If this is one louver carrier, it will be interconnected to the next louver carrier, and that is why the louver carriers are required to be measured. So they are interconnected, and that is how they are going to hold the glasses each. So the louver carrier is usually attached to the frames, that is the mullion and also the jamb. So it will be attached here so that you can now have a control that would now likely open or close this particular window. So these are the louver carriers. They are going to be, we will be having a pair of louver carrier here, a pair of louver carriers here, and a pair of louver carriers here. So we would still be measuring for that. So I will show you how to measure for louver carriers. And then after we are done measuring for louver carriers, we'll move down to glazing. Like I said, the concept of measuring for doors and windows simply is very simple, and you just need to understand that when there is a glass, you need to calculate the size of the glass. That is simply because you want to describe and tell the contractor that this is the size of glass that should be supplied, in case if he wants to order for those glasses to be supplied by a nominated subcontractor, so he'll be able to state out the size. They cannot just bring out the subcontractors cannot just bring to the site, let me say, a glass of 1200 by 1200 to fit in a space of 500 by 500. That is why we need to know the size of our glazing, which entails the glass work, so that we can know what to be describing in the bill, and we'll know the kind of glass that the subcontractors will bring into site. Now after we are done measuring for glazing, we can now move down to painting of framework. Remember, we cannot paint glass, so we can only paint the frame. So this is painting to frames. which includes the head, the jamb, the seal, and so on and so forth. When we are done doing those painting, then remember we always have reviews. So we'll do painting to reviews, and if you don't know what a review is, I've explained that in my previous video, and I will do so even as we proceed with our calculation. And last but not the least, we'll carry out adjustment for openings. So always pay attention to these items. Any kind of door you are given, you are just expected to, except if, sorry, I said door, if you are given a window, which is a louver's window, these are the takeoff item you need to take note of. But if your window is different from this, you can also use other approaches, which I'm going to show in a video that I'll specifically produce to show us examples of different kinds of doors and windows that you may likely be faced with in real life problem or even in examinations, which you have to tackle. Now, without wasting much of our time to measure, we'll start with the first one, which is our frames. And all you need to do is to describe. The descriptions are always easy. I can start with, let's start with the head. So I'll have 50 by 100 mm wrought wood head. I can say hardwood head. So we have this as a head, and look at the dimension of our head is given from this point to this point, and the dimension is 1800. So I need to book for my head as 1.80. Let us assume that this window is 3 in numbers. Let's assume the window is 3 in numbers. So if the head is 1.8, look at it, the distance from here to here, that's the head, 1.80. I'll multiply it by 3 because I have 3 of these windows available. When I'm done measuring for head, I'll measure for the seal. Look at it, the seal is the same as the head. The head is from here to here, while the seal is also from this point to this point. So they are the same, which is 1/8. So I will just book for my seal. I can just say ditto seal. That is to say the same dimension for seal. So I'll bracket these two, which simply means that this dimension is applicable to the head and the seal. I'm through with these first two. I'll move down to the mullion. Remember, the mullion and the jamb are of the same length. So I'll move down to the mullion. Before I can book for the mullion, also remember or take note that the jamb is given as 50 by 100. So the head is given as 50 by 100. So the head would commence from this point to this point as 50 mm. And in other words, our jamb is going to start from here to this place. Our jamb is not going to start at the exact base of the seal. So since the jamb is starting from this point rather than this point, it means I have to deduct this 50, and I also have to deduct this 50 as the head from the entire length of the jamb, because the point from here to here is 1, 2. So let us do that. I have my overall length as 1200, so I'm going to less head is 50, and seal is also 50, which is 100. If I less it, I'll have 1100. This is now the real length of my mullion and my jamb. You have to take note of that. In case you see any of you see something different in the calculations that is done in class, just take note that this is one of the best approach that will help you get the accurate measurement of your work. So my length for jamb and my mullion are given as 1100. I can now book for it now. Let's say our mullion is given as 50 by 100 mm mullion. Ending on D2. Let's say jambs. Now, like we've measured, we see the length of our mullion and the length of our jamb is given as 1100. So I'll book it as 1.10. I'll close it, and that is for one of the mullion. Remember, 1.10 for this mullion, and then I have 2 mullion here, so I'll multiply it by 2 because there are 2 mullion and 2 jambs. So this is by 2, then multiply by 3. So take note that this dimension is going to be applicable to both the mullion and the jamb. That is why we have 1.10 the overall length by 2, which stands for 2 mullion, and then by 3, which is for 3 windows, or by 2, which stand for 2 jambs, by 3 for 3 windows. So this is how to book for the mullion and the jambs of this particular work. Now if you are done booking for your mullion and jamb, it simply means that you are done with your head, seal, mullion and jamb. The next thing to work on is your louver carriers. The louver carriers are very easy to measure. Now the louver carriers, as we can see in this diagram, is always set in such a way that it has a control. Let's say this is a control for this louver carrier. When you press this, these louver carriers that carries the glass would respond to this either by opening or by closing. So take note that every kind of louver's window always have sets of louver carriers. They come as sets. That means this carrier here is a corresponding set with this carrier. So these two carriers work hand in hand in such a way that they simultaneously open or close, and that is why we call them set of louver carriers. So in this window we have three different parts, therefore we'll be having three different sets of louver carriers. We'll be having one set here, we have another set here, and the third set here. So these sets of louver carriers are responsible to respond simultaneously to either the opening and closing of the glass work, and that is why we always have sets of louver carriers. So for louver carriers you don't need much stress. All you need to do is to describe, but while describing, always state the quantity or the number of glass that each louver carriers are to carry. Like for instance, in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 glasses. If you bring in a louver carrier that is meant for carrying 10 glasses, it is not going to fit into this particular window. Hence, you have to be considerate enough to know the number of glasses that the window is going to have, so that you can describe the kind of louver carrier that will be supplied for fixing of this window. So let us describe louver carrier. We now have set of louver carriers to suit 8 numbers. Remember, I've counted this as 8. I've counted the glass work as 8. So to suit 8 numbers of louver blade. Mind you, the louver blade are the glasses. Okay, so let us assume that it is 150 mm wide. Please take a look at this. Now, the assumption I'm making here is to say that the distance from here to here is 100 mm, 150 mm, I mean to say. So sometimes you may not like to assume this. You may want to calculate it by yourself. And the simple way of calculating it is by picking this overall 1200. You less this 50 and less this other 50. Then you divide the answer you have, which is 1100, by the number of glasses. So if I divide 1, which is the length of this, my framework, that is the length of the jamb. If I divide the length of the jamb by the number of glasses in this place, I would know the width or the height of each of these glasses. But I assume it to be 150 mm. But for your own sake, you can actually calculate it by the way I just stated out here. So we have it as 150 mm wide, screwed. It should be screwed to the jamb. Now I'm done with this. Remember, I said that set of louver carriers. If you look at your window carefully, we have 3 spaces which will accommodate 3 sets of louver carriers. 1 set, 2 sets, 3 sets. So because there are 3 sets of louver carriers on this window, I will book it as 3 to show that it is 3 sets of louver carriers. And then I'll multiply this by 3 because we have 3 numbers of windows. So 3 numbers of window to accommodate 3 sets of louver carriers, and that is that for the louver carriers. So we'll move down to the louver blade, or you can call it glazing. So this is it, louver blade. Whenever you are faced with any calculation relating to doors and windows that shows anything that has glazing, always take note that it is your responsibility to calculate the size or the dimension of the glass to be used, simply because it is necessary to give the subcontractor or whoever will be getting the contract the right description for each glass that is to be supplied. There is no way a subcontractor can supply a glass that has a dimension of 150 by 200 to fit into a window that may likely need a glass of 300 by 400. It is going to become a very big challenge. And remember, it is difficult to cut glass, and you can hardly reshape a smaller glass that doesn't fit into a larger shape. So take note that they are always brittle, and any slight problem, you would have to repurchase the total glass you need all over again. These are not block work that can be refabricated into the shape that the mason the mason actually needs it on site. It has to be fabricated from where it is supplied from, and that is why you have to state the dimension of your louver blade. To be able to know the dimension of my louver blade, already I've made an assumption that the distance of my blade from here to here is 150. Now all I need to know is to know the distance from this point to this point. If you look at this drawing carefully, you will discover that the louver carriers at this point, they are about 15 mm wide. That means this louver carriers here 15 mm wide. The one that is here is 15 mm wide. The louver carriers I have here, I didn't try to thicken this my shading, but the louver carrier here is also 15 mm wide. That is why they are stated here. Now look at the jamb. The jamb is 50 mm wide. The mullions are also 50 mm wide. So to know the real length of this particular glass after assuming the width to be 150, I need to deduct this jamb, the mullions, and this last jamb from the overall length. Then I will deduct the thickness of my louver carriers from the overall length, and after I'm done doing so, I can now finally divide what I have by 3, and that is going to give me the real length of my glass. That is what we're going to be doing right away. So let us look at this as careful as possible so that we would get a perfect understanding of what we are about to do. So let's start with 1800. That is the overall length. Remember, I want to get the length of one glass. So 1800, let us deduct the jambs and the mullions. So I'm going to less jamb and mullion, which is 4 by 50. The reason why I have 4 here is because we have 2 jambs, 2 mullion, which makes it 4, and their sizes are the same. Their sizes are 50 each, so that is why I have it as 4 by 50. So if I multiply this, I'll be having 200. So when I subtract, I have 0061. Now I've got to 1600. I'm still going to less. Like I said, the louver carrier here is 15 mm thick each. Now we have one louver carrier here, 2 here. So for each section we have two louver carriers, making it 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I also need to deduct this 15 mm thick louver carrier from the overall length. So I'm going to less 6 by 15. And if I multiply 15 by 6, I'll end up having 90. This is 30. Yeah, so 90. So I have 0. It's going to give me 1. Here is 5. Then I have 1. Now this is the real length of the glass across this section. From this point to this point, excluding the mullion and the carrier, this is the real length of the glass, 1510. So if I want to get the length of one side of the glass, since this 3 sides of the glass makes up 1510, I will divide 1510 by 3 to get the length of one part. So I'm going to divide by 3, and that is going to give me 503.3, which is approximately 503 millimeters. Now this is now the real length of the glass. That means the glass is given as 150 mm by 503 mm. This is now the actual dimension of our glass. So if I have gotten this dimension, that is the essence of this calculation. Just to get this dimension, all I need to do now is to book. I can now start by saying 6 mm plain glass. This is a louver blade, so I should indicate it. Plain glass louver blade, which is 150 mm wide and 503 mm long. And then if you wish, you can continue. So I can say polished at the edge also. I can stop it here. So I've explained 6 mm plain glass louver blade, 150 mm wide and 503 mm long. If I have done this, all I need to do is to book for the number of the blades that are in the window. Like we've counted here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 blades here. So since there are 8 blades, I would need to book for the 8th number of blades. So let us book for it. We have it as 8 multiplied by 3. The reason why I'm having 3 here is simply because I have 3 sections of the glass. 1, 2, 3. So that is 3. 8 bleed in one section, 3 sections. Then multiply by another 3. That is the 3 numbers of windows that are available as given in the plan. Now when I have done this, I am now good to go. All I need to do is to move down to my painting to frames and painting to reviews. Remember that the framework is only where you need to paint. I mean, my glass does not really need painting, it just needs polishing. If I don't really need it to be polished because of I'm looking at cost, I should actually paint the framework to be able to get good results. So all I just need to do under painting and decoration, and this is what I just need to do. I will need to use KPS paint, which is not prime and stop paint, applied on, let's say, frames. You can include it as window frames. So applied on frames, and let us assume that this is what we want to do. So the best thing to do when you have written this your description is just to simply book all your work in linear meters. Remember, we are going to be applying this paint to the mullion, and we are going to be applying it to the jamb, and the length we have for our mullion from our initial calculation was 1100. So I will be booking it as 1.10 multiplied by 2, that is for the mullion, and then I have to multiply this by 3 for 3 windows. Then I can still book it as 1.10 multiplied by 2 for the jamb, multiplied by 3. Remember, this is the mullion and this is your jamb. So I have booked for mullion and jamb, 2 mullion, 3 windows. Then I can now book for the head. The head is 1.80 multiplied by 3 different windows. Then 1.80 multiplied by 3 seal. This is the seal and this is the head. Please do not write this in your exams. I'm just putting this down for the sake of easy computation and understanding. So when you are done booking for this, you have actually booked for applying paint to the mullion, the jamb, the head, and the seal. You can now move down to painting to review. And when you now work on painting to review, then you are almost done with your work. I hope this is very easy. Before I round up this particular episode, I'd like you to subscribe to this channel and also click on the notification button to get notified. Like this video and share it with friends. And I'm very, very sure that it will be helpful to your friends. So let us move on to painting to review. Now, like I explained in my previous video, I told us that whenever the width of your reveal is not up to 300 mm, you are expected to book your finishes in linear meter. But whichever the case may be, some people usually like to move extra mile to book it in square meter so that they can measure for it just the way they measure for other plastering work, which is not supposed to be so. So just take note that when you're painting or your plastering is not up to 300, the surface is not up to 300 mm wide, just book it in linear meter. So I can just say painting to review. All right, let us start with the rendering. 12 mm rendering to review. Remember that we are going to do the same for painting. I can just say 2 coat of emulsion paint. To reviews. Now remember that we are going to pick the overall length and the overall width. The overall length we have here is 1/8 and the overall width we have here is 1/2. So I'll pick the first one, 1.8 multiplied by 2. Remember there will be 2 reviews, one at the base, one at the top. This is not door where you have only one at the head. So there is going to be 2 reviews at the head and at the seal. And then we'd also have 1.20 multiplied by 2. That is for these 2 sides. At this side, at this side. So overall length, overall width. Now I can now multiply this by 3 windows, multiply this by 3 windows, and I am done with painting and also rendering to our reviews. Bracket this together so that you know your work is done. Now, last but not the least is to work on the opening adjustment. When I work on the opening adjustment, then I am done booking or measuring for my window. I hope this has been helpful. So I just need to deduct. Remember what I did the last time? Deduct the dot, the what do you call it? Deduct the block work separately. So I can just say deduct 225 mm thick hollow sandcrate block, and then the dimension of my window is 1.80 by 1.20. Remember, this is going to be booked in square meters, so you pick the overall length of your window by the overall width of your window, so multiply by 3. Just 3 windows. We are going to deduct block work for 3 windows. Then I will now move down to the next one. Deduct 12 mm rendering on wall internally and externally. Ending on, remember I always join the rendering and the plastering together because they are of the same work item, since they are 2 in numbers, front and back. So I will now say 2 coat of emulsion paint. Mind you, it is not always emulsion paint. The deduction does not, sometimes the painting that is used in real life experience may not be emulsion paint, it may be test coat or what have you. So ensure that whenever you are working in real life, that is in a real life project, you have to make sure this is a kind of working hand in hand with what you have as the finishes in the building you are measuring for. So it is not always emulsion paint. I'm just saying this just to make sure that I draw attention to this. So we have 2 coats of emulsion paint on wall, both internally and externally. So I can now book for this, still 1.80 by 1.20, close it, multiply by 2. Remember, 2 sides, internally and externally. Although I am not showing this here, but we are just removing the deduction for this space, internally and externally. So multiply by 3. This 3 signifies 3 different openings that are found around the windows. So if you have done this, you are now done measuring for your window. Kindly leave a comment if you have any problem or a challenge with everything I've explained in this video, and if you are clear with everything I've said, share it with your friends, like and subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to click on the notification button so that I can actually so that YouTube can notify you of subsequent videos I'll be releasing. And also I would like to say this, that I've actually been very busy with school activities and I've not had enough time to produce my videos, and so my videos can be a bit shabby. Please just bear with me. I'm sure after my exams I'll have enough time to come up with better videos. So thank you for your time and